Hi, Vinita. Thanks for joining us today. Um, so today the aim of this video is for my friends to see the achievements you have achieved in life and the things you have and your journey that you've been through in spite of all the obstacles that came your way. You're a true inspiration for me, and I know that you will be a big source of inspiration for all my friends who will be watching this video. So thank you for joining us.
That means so much to me. That's really heartfelt. I appreciate that.
So for those of my friends who don't know you, I'll have a quick introduction to Vinita's career. And it's a really long list. And I don't think I could do justice to it. But I'm just picking out the main specializations that she did. So she specialized her BA honors from York University in alternate dispute resolution.
Yeah, so it was sociology, and under that, my thesis was in restorative justice and alternative dispute resolution. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And then you went to Wilford Laurier University, where you did your master's in social work.
Yes, and so I did that after years. So I didn't go to school right after my undergraduate degree. I worked. And then while I was doing my master's in social work, I also worked actually full time. So I was going part time and doing my studies in Waterloo, Kitchener. And I was also then going all the way back to Toronto and working, because it's expensive. Education's expensive. And I learned that from my undergraduate degree. I did not want to have any student loans. So I did that. And then I took another gap after that. So I have never been able to just go to school straight. I've had to take multiple breaks.
Isn't that exciting? You got to think of the next step. You explored everything before you took the next step.
Absolutely, because sometimes we get impulsive and we make big decisions and we're not completely sure about those things. So I really went for more what I was passionate about, and I was really blessed that my family really encouraged me to choose whatever subjects that I wanted to pursue, whatever my interest was, whatever my passion was, they supported that. So I was able to take my time and actually study and travel and work and meet people and then say, okay, I think I'm ready to go back to school again. So, yeah.
And then so there's something really interesting to me is that you went to University of Cambridge and you studied neurological risk and protective factors for development and trajectory of antisocial behavior. And you did your
Yeah.
MPhil, MSc? Yeah.
Yes, so it was in the Faculty of Law. So I studied at the Institute of Criminology, and my master's was in criminological research. So that is what I studied. I was always very interested in neurocriminology, which is a new field, but looking at sort of the application of psychology to understanding risk. What happens in the brain, what prevents people from being able to regulate themselves, because I used to teach anger management for years in the correctional facility. So I used to teach substance use. I used to help people with managing domestic violence cases, basically working on their risk factors, why they got into trouble. So I was always curious, what makes some people tick and some people don't tick.
Yeah.
And so because I had that understanding of sociology and sort of the ecosystems and the environmental factors that influence the way people behaved, I was also interested in the psychological component and, what's happening up here that's making people also interact with the environment. And of course, we know now with epigenetic research that it's really the interaction of both. It's sort of, we have those genes that could be dormant within us, and then they can become expressed by the environment. And I just found that really fascinating. And it was the sort of the top school in the world. It was actually a dream of mine to be accepted. It was probably the highlight of my life. So I'm really blessed to have had that experience.
Is there where you interacted with prison inmates or?
No. I worked, that was my first job. So actually, before I went for my master's in social work, I started working with John Howard Society of Toronto. So John Howard is basically a national organization in Canada, and they work with men who are in conflict with the law and sort
Mm.
of all the risk factors that put them in that conflict with the law. So that could be things like having substance use issues, being homeless, having anger issues. So a lot of them were sent to what's called a community justice diversion program. And so I was trained as a facilitator to work in the prisons and in the courts, so that helping them to reduce their likelihood of going back out into the community and committing violent crimes again. So basically we did individual counseling, but we also did group therapy. And so that's when I really got trained in cognitive behavioral therapy and
Mm.
mindfulness based stress reduction. So I learned basically these different modalities back then. So this was after sociology, after I finished my undergraduate degree. My first, I would say, main job was working at John Howard. And then I was able to get some work with Correctional Services of Canada and get all that work experience. And then that's when I decided maybe I should go back for my social work program. And so that's when so while I was doing my social work MSW, I then also was still working in Toronto and doing that work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I can see a photograph behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Is that from Cambridge?
Yes, it is. I can actually give you a close up of it.
Yeah,
You can see that.
that's a really nice photo.
I'm kneeling in front, of the master, and basically that was my graduation ceremony. They say something in Latin to us,
Oh,
and basically it's a tradition that they in at convocation that
mhm.
you're actually a graduate of University of Cambridge. So
Nice.
yeah, so and then this is my grandmother. So she was a big influence in my life. She always encouraged me to, reach for my highest potential,
Yeah.
to get as much education as possible. And so, these are influenced, of course, Buddha's there. And I'm always near books because
Yeah.
I love learning. That's just my thing. So
And it's very obvious from your resume that you like learning
a little
and,
obsessed with
and
learning. Yeah.
teaching.
And teaching, yeah, learning and teaching, because as much as I love being a student, I love teaching, and vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, okay, so I'm at Cambridge right now, but
Yeah.
um, you also worked as a college instructor in
Yes.
community-based social work, and then you
Yes.
also did teaching and strategies.
Yes.
And so that, I think you were doing that for like 4 years, for 5 years in total.
In total, yeah. So the thing is, I think with a lot of jobs these days, especially with social work, it's hard to get a full-time job.
Mhm.
It just is. So I've always had 2 or 3 jobs simultaneously. Even right now, I'm working 3 different jobs.
That's
And
crazy.
it's because it's hard to make enough income doing one. And sometimes the hours are not consistent. So you have to do other things.
Yeah.
So this is before I went to Cambridge, actually, I was also teaching. So I had started my private practice right after I finished my master's in social work. And I was able to register with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. So that's when I became a licensed social worker. So I
Mhm.
started right away, set up my private practice. And while I was working, it takes time to build up clients in your private practice. So that was still going on. And then I also took a part-time teaching. So I was teaching as a college professor doing community-based social work. And that was in Yorkville, Toronto, downtown Toronto. And that is where I met my fabulous students. I met so many wonderful students from all over the world. And they are the ones who made me believe in myself again. I was going through a really tough period, as much as all these other great things were going on. I was married at that time, and I loved my husband. He loved me, but we had challenges
Yeah.
because I had, as you know, I had a terrible disease that really affected my marriage. It affected my life, and I lived in chronic pain every single day. So I would say for 30 years of my life, I would say I've lived in chronic, debilitating pain. And I didn't want to show anyone that side of me. So I kept it inside. And I actually think one of the reasons why I stayed so busy working, going to school, was because I did not want to focus on my disability. I did not want to give endo the attention that I thought it wanted from me. So what I've always tried to do when something is trying to pull me down is I try to ignore it.
Yeah.
And I've been told that the more you feed something energy, the more it increases.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why to other people it might seem like I have ADHD. I'm always studying and working and doing this. It's really a form of coping, is to push yourself, kill yourself, so that you don't have to think about how you're feeling.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
But
but those students were profound in me going to Cambridge, because as much as I wanted to, my whole life I dreamed of going there, or Oxford, and I just never thought I could, because of my pain, first of all, and then also because of my other disability, having my vision problems. It takes me twice as long to read something than a normal person. And as much as I had assistive technologies and audio things, and ways to listen to books, it was still hard. So between not being able to sit for long periods of time
yeah,
and not being able to see very well when you're on the computer, it's between those two. To do school is really hard, and that's why I've had to take breaks and work, also to save money, of course, and then go back and forth, back and forth. But my students at that time told me, because I was trying to build them up, because remember I was teaching community-based social work, so I was trying to tell them that we need to build capacity when people don't have opportunities in life and they face oppressions in life. That's true. That exists. There's some people who have more privilege than other people, but our goal as social workers is to try to help to balance out those scales,
right.
right? So what that means is that educate people on what their rights are, what they can do, get them to focus on their strengths, get them to build skills in other areas that they can't do, maybe they can't do, but maybe other things they can do. So for example, my hearing is incredible. Because my vision is not good, I mean, I have to rely on my sense of hearing. I have to rely on my sense of touch. So you learn to develop other senses and other skills when you are compromised in other areas. So I used to tell my students that. So they dared me, basically. They said, well, Miss, what's one thing you've always wanted to do? And I told them. And then they said, well, why don't you do it? And I said, well, I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
And I used to always get down on them. And I used to say, you can never use the word can't in front of me. I will not tolerate it,
Yeah.
because the more you tell yourself you can't do something, the more you can't do it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I told them that never use always, never, should. Like, these are extreme words that in cognitive behavioral therapy, we teach our patients that this is actually a distortion. It's a cognitive distortion that actually prevents us from making progress. So then they told me to take my own advice, basically. And so then they dared me to apply to Cambridge. I would have never applied if it weren't for my students
Yeah.
who believed in me and who said, you know what, you are making us push ourselves, we're going to push you. And so because of them, I applied, and I don't know how I got in, but all I can tell you is at that time, I really needed some good news in my life, because I had gone through my second surgery, and I was in a horrible state. I lost some of my anatomy. On top of that, I was going through my divorce, and it was a horrible time. I lost a lot of money. I lost my business. I had a lot of loss at that time. And so I was very depressed. I was really down in
Yeah.
my life. And so when I got the admission letter, it was like God is trying to tell me that it's not over yet for me, that there's still some hope. So I prayed and I prayed, and I think I was always religious, but I really was grateful, and it helped me to get away from Canada, because I experienced so much loss that I wanted to get away from here, and I wanted to start life new and
Yeah.
fresh and everything. So that's how that happened. It was honestly like a dream that happened. and I
Yeah.
then I came back to Canada, and you know, it
Yeah.
was reality. Yeah.
So now you're working